This is the No More Wasted Days podcast, and we're your hosts, Sarah Kaufman Bradstreet
and Heather PG. Grab your favorite NA drink and listen as we share vulnerable stories so you never feel alone on your alcohol-free journey.
And gain insights from us as we break down our most used tips and strategies that have kept us alcohol-free.
It's time to break free from wasting any more of your days to the drinking, blackout, hangover cycle.
Welcome to another episode of the No More Wasted Days podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sarah.
I'm Heather.
And today we are talking all about something called PAWS. Do you know what that is, Heather?
I do. I did not until I quit drinking.
That's how I was. I didn't know about it probably until almost a year into my journey. And somebody actually mentioned it on social media to me. And I was like, what is that? And if you don't know, we're saying PAWS, and it stands for Post-Acute Withdrawal Syndrome. So post meaning after the acute withdrawal syndrome period. Because I think a lot of people are familiar with the idea that you'll go through withdrawals when you quit drinking, or you may go through withdrawals, but not a lot of people know that there may be something after all of that.
Yes. I worked in a hospital for a long time, so I knew that people from alcohol. I was a substance use counselor and knew the effects of alcohol and other drugs in terms of withdrawal, but I'm not sure that PAWS or post-acute withdrawal syndrome was as common in those times, or that I wanted to even hear it because I was still a drinker.
Yeah, right. I know. I didn't even really think about withdrawal symptoms when I first quit drinking. And that was another thing when I would talk about my journey of quitting drinking. Every now and then I would get a person being like, but what about withdrawals? And so then I started doing more research on just what can happen afterwards so that I could lead people in the right direction. Because believe it or not, everybody, I'm not a medical doctor.
I am not either. And my withdrawals were bad. So maybe that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, we're actually going to talk just a little bit about our withdrawal symptoms in it. So you'll get a tiny chance, but you have to do a quick summary,
I didn't do my homework.
I won't tell anybody. All right. So first I'm going to talk about just the difference between PAWS and acute withdrawal. And when I say acute withdrawal, we're thinking about the withdrawal symptoms that most people are familiar with, except for drinking. Sarah was not familiar with them. So, but PAWS is something that will happen after those withdrawal symptoms. So it can happen about 2 weeks after, and it can happen months, or they say even years after quitting alcohol. And I do not want you to start panicking right now. If you just hit the panic button and you're saying, well, I'm not going to quit drinking then if I'm going to have withdrawal symptoms, they are not the same as the withdrawal symptoms that we're used to hearing about. PAWS is we might have anxiety, irritability, mood swings, difficulty concentrating, and cravings may last a little longer than we expect. So these are all things we can learn to manage, and I'm going to give tips on how to manage these as well. And it's different from the acute withdrawal just because it happens later, and it can fluctuate in intensity. And that's something that you need to know too, because sometimes people will be 30 days into their journey and say, oh my gosh, I'm so moody. Oh my gosh, I can't sleep all of a sudden, and my sleep was great, and now it's really off. And it could be something to do with PAWS. So acute withdrawal symptoms are what people generally think of. They're in those first few days of quitting drinking. And these are things like tremors or a headache, nausea, sweating, anxiety, panic attacks, confusion, restless sleep, and intense craving. I just scared the shit out of everybody, probably.
I can see my face right now. I'm like, check. I had every bit of that.
And I always tell people, like, it is worth it. But also, if you are worried, please talk to a doctor because they have ways to help you through this. There are medications you can take. They can set you up with a lot of electrolytes because what's really happening is, one, your body is processing those toxins, getting them out of your system, but also your body's learning how to be a body, and you just took away this huge thing that it just used to use. So that's why a lot of those things happen right at the beginning, but it might also be because, oh my God, you're super dehydrated. You have no nutrients because alcohol was taking all of those things from you. So reach out to a medical professional if you're freaked out.
Yes. And don't freak out because most of what you just named is a hangover.
Yeah.
And a hangover is withdrawals. And take it serious all at the same time.
Do take it serious and do know that it can be a very serious thing, but also don't let it be the thing that keeps you from quitting drinking, because I've actually had people that I've worked with who thought, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. The withdrawals are going to be so awful." And they had very little. And that's how I was. I had a headache. I was super thirsty, and that's about it.
Yeah,
So I was very lucky. I've now found out, but Heather had a different experience.
I did. I drank a lot. And and I don't think that that is a concrete yes or no that you
Mhm.
will go through withdrawals. Like the story I told myself on April 10th, 11th of 2021 was I had a stomach bug. That was the story I was telling myself.
Right after you quit drinking.
Hmm.
Impeccable timing.
Right? So all of the things that you named, the sweating, nausea, headache, confusion, like I felt like I was having a fever dream
Mhm.
and I was terrified I was going to have a seizure. I had been in the medical field my whole career and I lived with a nurse. Most of my family's nurses. It's just how my brain was oriented. And I used it as an excuse to not drink
Mhm.
because somehow I was different than the people that I helped going through withdrawals with ego. So mine were bad. And like I said, the person I was married to was a nurse. So I was monitored.
Mhm. Yeah. And
So,
you knew you could watch the symptoms. You knew how to get yourself to help if you needed more help than could be delivered at home.
mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
but also you made it and you're
I
on the other
did.
side. And was it worth it?
Fuck yeah, it was worth it. That was a powerful statement out of my mouth. Excuse my French,
I
but
put the
it's true.
explicit mark on us. Yeah, no, it is. And I think too, knowing more about withdrawals and pause is going to help you go, I don't want to go back to drinking
Hmm.
because I don't want to do that again. And that's my thing because I think about hangovers. Oh, I had some terrible hangovers in my day. And when I realized they were withdrawals, but then I would start drinking again. So my body was like, there we go. We're good now. I'm like, oh, because when I read that list, I do see, oh my God, that was so many of my hangovers.
Hmm.
Not every single one, but a lot of them were there. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I think we've got the difference between just acute withdrawal and pause down. So now we're really going to take a deep dive into pause. We're going to talk about the symptoms, timeline, why it happens, and then I'm going to talk to you about coping strategies you can use, just because it can feel really overwhelming knowing, oh my gosh, this is something that can happen for a while. So there's various symptoms of pause, and there are emotional symptoms, cognitive symptoms, and physical symptoms. And some of the emotional symptoms can be anxiety, which will manifest as nervousness or restlessness or worry. And the thing about them is they may arise unexpectedly and even in situations that were previously manageable. It's just something to be aware of, that if you're somewhere and you're having extreme anxiety and you're like, where is this coming from? This is something I've done a million times. Well, it could be a symptom of pause. Now, just a quick tangent. Last night at choir rehearsal, it was our first choir rehearsal back. I was running late to rehearsal. I knew it wasn't a big deal because they always start the first one late anyway, but I still got myself all worked up. I had the hardest time bringing myself back down once I was in rehearsal, and almost to that level of, am I having a panic attack? This is
Oh
not
gosh.
good. And then I finally realized, like, you have your sweatshirt on, you're super hot, take your sweatshirt off and be in a tank top for a moment, cool off, drink some water, and everything was okay. Now, that in my brain could be, and I've been doing research for this podcast. So I was like, is this pause? And I was like, no, it's not pause, silly. You're 5 years into your journey. It could be perimenopause, though. And
Right?
I was like, oh. So just, I'm telling the story because it gave me something when I said, why is this happening? This has never happened to me. Like, I'm having problems focusing. I just cannot get my body to calm down. Don't worry, it finally did calm down. Everything was good. But I went through the little thing there where I was like, is it pause? No. Is it perimenopause? Probably. And it helped. So I think that just knowing, like, okay, this could be a symptom gives you that power. Another thing, which I hear the most about these two, is irritability and mood swings. You might be frustrated or angered over minor triggers, and it's because your emotional regulation system in the brain is still healing, and it's leading to shorter tempers and emotional sensitivity. So if that's happening, that's okay. It will smooth out. It will change. You might be having mood swings where you're noticing yourself going from feeling hopeful and happy about your journey to sad or angry. And this is something people say a lot. It just feels like you're on an emotional roller coaster when you first quit drinking.
That's a fact.
Yes, it is. And mine was like crying for no reason at all. Just, I couldn't even pinpoint it. And I always say, I think it's because there's so many emotions that were buried and now
Hmm.
they're all coming up. I have no
Yeah.
scientific data on that.
No, I think so. And you were numb forever. You're like a raw nerve moving through the world, and for what can be a while.
Yeah, yeah. And I think about that because I was telling Heather before the recording, I was like, I don't know if I really had pause symptoms. But then I look at those things and I am like, oh, I did have those mood swings that were big for me. And that's the thing, too. You got to know, is this big for you? Is this normal for you or not? So the next way is cognitive symptoms. This is going to be difficulty concentrating, memory problems, thinking about short term memory here, where you just get kind of, I mean, I feel like this is my life. You go into a room, forget why you're there. But it but it may be more intense in the beginning. And you may even have brain fog. Now, all of these, I don't feel like I've had any of these symptoms after I quit drinking. All of these things actually improved for me. How about you, Heather?
I was actually talking about this Saturday or Sunday. I don't really know. And I say that because I got diagnosed with breast cancer at like 100 days sober. And that was in July. And I started chemo in December of that year. And chemo wreaks havoc on your brain and your cognition and your word finding. And it's called chemo brain. So I think my difficulty concentrating has a lot to do with ADHD and chemo brain, memory problems, brain fog, more so than I think it's the absence of alcohol.
Yeah, that's
And chemo brain can last for truly years, and it may not ever change back again.
yeah, because it's such a huge thing happening to your body and
Yeah.
happening to your brain.
But I actually don't know,
Yeah.
100% to say that. So it's difficult, especially when like I just did it, like having a word, I couldn't find the word, and I get
Hmm.
frustrated. And sometimes it'll remind me of when I was a drinker and kind of slurry.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you can be like me checking off the list. Is this pause? No. Is this chemo brain?
Yes.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
So the last symptom can be those physical symptoms. And these can be, it can, it can throw you off because you're feeling so good on your journey. And then these things will happen. So maybe it's fatigue, sleep disturbances, or even physical coordination issues. For me, I think it was the sleep disturbances, but mine was that I wanted to sleep all the time. And but
Mm-hmm.
not like during the day I felt good, energetic, my normal self, but I could sleep for like 10 to 12 hours for a while after I
Yeah,
kept quit drinking. And I
me
didn't
too.
realize that that was a part of pause or a symptom when it was happening. I was just like, "Dang, I'm tired."
Mm-hmm.
But so that's just and people talk a lot too about the vivid dreams when they first quit drinking.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember that. My husband went on a melatonin kick when we first quit drinking. He said, "Oh, it gives me vivid dreams and I love them. I love this stuff." I hated it. So I was like, "Hell no, I feel like I didn't sleep at all."
Do you remember when I put in the telegram of the Daymakers that I dreamed the White House floor was bubble gum pink?
No,
I did.
that happened.
I was like, hey, y'all, I don't know if this is normal. I also dreamed about one of our other members, like night before last. I dream a lot about Taylor Swift, and I've been quit for 3 months and 5 days today. So it could just be me.
Yeah. Well, I listened to another podcast, my two Gomers. I've talked about them before, but they were talking about getting the best sleep in midlife. And one of them mentioned that sleep is really important to cognitive repair and emotional repair. And that's why sometimes we'll have, well, they theorized and they both said, I don't have scientific data on this, but they theorized like that's why sometimes you'll have those crazy anxiety dreams when you're stressed. And if it's happening, you can wake up and go, what's stressing me out? So I'll say I'll have every now and then the crazy dreams. Sometimes they'll stick around for a while. And usually it is an anxiety thing for me. It's funny you said I dream a lot about Taylor Swift because I dream a lot about AJR. I feel so dorky
I
because I'm like
do.
an old lady.
I get it. I told my mom, she was like, "You dream about Taylor Swift once a week." I was like,
Yeah. I
I don't
told
know.
Ryan, I said, I dreamed that AJR was part of the mob. He was like, "What is going on?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "I know they're not, but I just had to let you know."
I dreamed that Taylor Swift was trying to give me booze, and two of my exes were like ganged up against me with Taylor.
Taylor would never do that.
Girl, bye. I woke up like, what the fuck? And this was this year. So the
Oh my
vivid
gosh.
dreams, I think it's just me and Sarah that dream about celebrities and details
I
like that.
do listen to their music a lot. So, and I do follow them on Instagram, like a little, I'm a fan girl. But, and funny enough, you mentioned Taylor Swift. I mentioned AJR. I put both of them in my stories this morning on Instagram. So there you go. The universe is working.
Mhm.
Okay. Back to pause, everybody. We took a brief pause. Well, that's not going to stop now either. We're going to be stuck in that. But brief pause, and now we're back to pause. So, the timeline of pause, I know this may freak you out. Please don't let it, because please understand that all of this is manageable and I'm going to help you cope with it. But it will happen weeks or even months after acute withdrawal. So sometimes you're going along and you're feeling great. You're 30 days alcohol free, you're 60 days alcohol free. And then all of a sudden, you're like, oh, I feel awful. I'm having mood swings. I'm having this. It's something we talk about a lot with our day makers of, okay, watch out when you hit a big milestone. Sometimes there's a letdown. And maybe this is a symptom of pause. So just know that those things may come and go. Never feel like you're quote unquote safe on your alcohol free journey. Because for me, my anxiety went away and it was just great. And then, perimenopause happened and I've had to start figuring out how to manage my anxiety again. So it's just your body's always working in this way. But moving on from the timeline of pause, I'm going to talk to you now about why pause actually occurs. And it happens because the brain has had a neurochemical imbalance during and after prolonged alcohol use. And prolonged alcohol use will disrupt that, and especially the neurotransmitters like GABA and glutamate. And if you remember from the episode we did all about the buzz, I talked about GABA being the one that makes our brain chill out and relax. And then glutamate is the neurotransmitter that wakes us back up. But when we're drinking, glutamate is just staying low and we're not getting that wake up response anymore. So that's why a lot of people drink to chill out, because it brings in more GABA for us. But all of a sudden, when alcohol is suddenly removed, this imbalance will cause us to almost feel overly excited in the brain. And that's why there can be the acute withdrawal symptoms like anxiety, irritability, tremors, and seizures. But it can take months or longer for the brain to restore to normal levels of these neurotransmitters. So that's making us contribute to those pause symptoms because our brain is still learning how to balance and still coming back. And the healing process of the brain and nervous system after quitting looks like the brain working to rebalance all of those transmitters. And the brain over time will restore to normal levels and the symptoms will decrease. So if you're having them, just know the brain is working overtime. I think that's why sleep was such a big deal for me when I first quit drinking, because my brain was like, whoa, I'm having to do
Yeah.
a lot.
I've heard people say, and I have no scientific evidence to say or to back this up, but when you quit drinking, it's like having a surgery. And
Yeah.
I've done both. I've had a lot of surgeries after I quit drinking, and just the fatigue and dehydration and all the things, it makes sense.
It's just so important to take care of ourselves and really also acknowledge that it's actually happening. Because I think that's one thing you might be like, no, this isn't part of quitting drinking. Well, maybe it is. And you can acknowledge that then. One thing, I love this, but the brain is working with its neuroplasticity, which is the ability to adapt and rewire. It allows damaged neural pathways to slowly repair. Now, those neural pathways will never go away that tell us, like, ooh, drink more after you've had one drink. They'll kind of shut down and become dormant. But your brain is now working to be like, let's create new neural pathways. Let's think about this a little bit different way. And that healing can improve the cognitive function. You'll start having better emotional regulation and mental clarity. But it's going to take a while. And it might take months, it might take even years, but give your brain time. It's like doing some really hardcore stuff,
Yeah. I mean, I was a pro for 20 years in terms of
right?
drinking. So it's going to take a minute to rewire and, as I so clinically say, think with your whole brain.
Yeah. And then the next thing I want to talk to you about is how do we cope with pause? So now you know about it. You know all about why it happens, but maybe you're thinking, well, I was about ready to do Sober October. And now I'm like, hell no, I don't want to do all this. Don't worry, there's ways that we can make all of this better. So the first thing you can do is start looking at more efficient self care strategies, things like proper nutrition. Now, I Googled really fast before we did this. While I was researching for this, I actually researched foods that will help support the production of GABA. And that's the thing that your brain really needs. This morning at breakfast, I drove my family crazy by saying that has GABA in it. That will help your body produce GABA. So now I'm going to tell you guys fermented food is one of them. So think yogurt, that's an easy one, kimchi or kombucha. Another thing you can do is start drinking some green tea. It will help your body produce GABA, especially matcha or oolong. And matcha is getting really hip right now, so that'll be easy to find. And then bananas. If you're having anxiety, eat a banana. And then almonds, walnuts, spinach, broccoli, and citrus fruits. So, all of those things will help your body produce more GABA. So, think about integrating those in. The next thing you can do is exercise. Remember, when you're exercising, it helps complete what's called the stress cycle. So, if you're super stressed out, if you're feeling those highs and lows all the time or anxiety, this can help. Go through a 30-minute workout session, a 30-minute walk. Push yourself a little bit on the walk because that will really help the body get stressed, hit a peak, and then actually complete that stress cycle, which is something your body needs. And then the last thing is get enough sleep, which I talked about the brain healing when you're sleeping. So think about cool room when you're sleeping, limit screens before bed, which I talked about on an episode. I'm doing much better with that, and just having a solid nighttime routine. Is there anything you would add to the sleep hygiene?
I think it's crucial, absolutely crucial. And I have worked with folks and have friends, and I was like this too about the word sleep hygiene. And,
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't want to go to bed. No, no, no. I don't like a routine. I don't like feeling like a crazy human.
Yeah, exactly. And if it can help with these symptoms and allow your brain to heal more efficiently, that's a cool thing.
Yeah. And what made me chuckle is I have a smart device in my home. I can't say it. But Sarah, you were leading a call one night and at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I was in the chat, like, it's time for me to do my bedtime. And I have, like, I know it is that important to me where I'll be like, bye, y'all,
Yeah. Have a great
And
chat.
our
I'm
call
out of
was
here.
over. I was
Yeah.
just like I had a hard stop at 9 p.m. because my device was telling me to take my medicine, and it tells me a funny self affirmation.
I love that. I keep thinking, oh, I need to do that. That's when I can kick the kids out. Go to bed. Mom needs to go to bed. But I lost my train of thought. Okay. So, another way to cope with those symptoms is to start thinking about mindfulness. This is going to help you with your emotional symptoms. We talked a lot about mindfulness on an episode just 2 episodes ago. I think it was episode 41. And things you can do to practice that mindfulness is meditation, breathing exercises, a sensory check where you just go through all your different senses, or journaling. Again, journaling can feel really overwhelming. I said this on the last episode, but you can go Google journal prompts and be like, what can I journal about? And that will really help you because I think sometimes that blank page staring at us really freaks us out. It does for me anyway. And then another thing is work with support groups or a coach or a therapist. We have the day makers that you can do. You can work with Heather as a one on one coach. And if you're doing those things and you're like, I'm just not getting what I really, really need, then look in on getting therapy. Figure out how to work with a therapist that you really like.
For sure. And One of the things I help my clients with is vetting a therapist, or this is the social worker in me by what I'm getting ready to say, like accessing them to care, not violating HIPAA, of course, but like,
Mm-hmm.
Heather, you've known me for a long time. What do you recommend? And I can only say this is a recommendation, not, based in anything clinical.
Yeah.
It can
Yeah.
be really impactful.
And it can be really overwhelming to see a therapist, find a therapist, all that stuff. And it also goes into a little bit of like finding insurance and figuring all that out and seeing if you can get some of it paid for. So I know the struggle is there when it comes to therapy, but there are a lot of cool options out there now, like BetterHelp, or even just starting with a life coach first or a support group like Daymakers and being like, well, does this do it for me? So definitely check those out. And then the last thing I want to talk to you about. So, those were our coping strategies for you. And then I want to talk to you about the impact on long term sobriety that PAWS can have. It can just feel like a really overwhelming hurdle. It can just go, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do this. This is going to be really hard. You'll feel like you aren't making progress in recovery, or you're constantly battling emotional and mental struggles. But I want you to know that it's going to get easier. And listening to a podcast like this is going to give you tools to be set up for success. Doing something like Sober October, where you're getting 30 days of videos delivered right to you, so you can go, oh, this is a part of sobriety. This is a part of being alcohol free. Those things can make it feel less hard. So look into those options for sure. And just know if you're feeling like your symptoms are so unpredictable and triggers can happen at any moment, and you're just trying to be like, why is this so out of whack? It's just part of the process. And then remind yourself, my brain is healing. My body is healing. And sometimes I think that reminder right there is the power you need to keep going. The other thing I want to offer to you, if you're thinking, well, this is so overwhelming, is you may want to drink to make the symptoms stop. You may say, well, this is just too stressful. I have too much anxiety. And alcohol may offer relief for a second, but guess what? It just puts your brain and body right back to where it was before. And now you've got all this work to do again. That was one of the things that kept me alcohol free in the beginning, knowing I don't want to go back to my withdrawals. I don't want to go back to having to learn how to feel my emotions again. Those neural pathways will open back up again. Your brain will get right back to its old drinking patterns really fast. And one thing we talk
Mhm.
about sometimes in the Daymakers is it can feel tempting to go back to drinking. And one of the things your drinking brain might tell you is, it's not a big deal if you drink tonight because you've quit before, so you can just get right back to work tomorrow. Well, not when your brain all of a sudden goes, oh, yay, here it is. And it just throws all that work out the window. Did you want to
Mhm.
add anything
It's
about the impact on, like, keep going, give them some rah rah?
I want to say, if you're thinking I'm having pause and I've been thinking about going back to drinking, I want you to not drink today. Get up in the morning and ask yourself, do I wish that I had drank yesterday? If the answer is yes, I wish I would have drank yesterday, I'll give you $1.
It just won't be, I promise. And it's so worth it to keep going. And just know too, these symptoms will stop. You will learn how to manage them more efficiently, and it will all get easier. So stay patient. Remember, your body is learning to be a body again without alcohol. And that's pretty cool. And before we end the podcast, I just want to remind you all, Daymakers is always open for you, as well as personal coaching with Heather. And enrollment is open for Sober October right now. And for podcast listeners, you can get a 10% discount on your enrollment by entering the coupon code podcast when you go to that checkout. When you get set up with the 30-day alcohol-free challenge, you are set up with daily videos, daily emails, and an online support system, so you don't feel alone on this journey. So definitely check that out.
Check it out. I think that this has been really good for me to relearn.
Yeah.
I had told Sarah that I didn't know much about PAWS, and I still am not an expert, and I know a lot more about it now. And check out our Counting Days episode too, because I think that could help for timelines and kind of what to expect, to give you some type of reference if you feel needed or led to do so. And give us a rating, leave us a review. We need to hit that 100 on Apple. That's Sarah's goal.
Yeah.
So
Got to have your goals, right?
that's right. All right. We'll be in your ear next Tuesday. Bye, y'all.